The hollow veil was a quiet stretch of space on the far edge of the map. Thick dust drifted between the stars there, slow and gray, like smoke that had nowhere to go. Most ships avoided it. The dust was hard on engines, and there was nothing worth visiting on the other side. Only one ship was crossing it that day, and her name was the Iron Verdict. She was a human frigate. Long, lean, and a little battered. Her hull was scratched from years of patrol work along the colonial rim, and the paint near her engines had been burned dark by too many hot re-entries. She was not a famous ship. She did not carry admirals or special cargo. She was just a working vessel, doing a slow survey run, and her crew was looking forward to going home. On the bridge, Captain Daniel Carter sat in his chair with a mug of black coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He was a tall man in his late 40s, with short gray hair and a face that had seen too much weather. He did not say much. He did not need to. His crew already knew what he wanted before he asked. Beside him stood Lieutenant Commander Megan Holt, his first officer. She was small, sharp, and quick to smile, but she had once served as a combat medic in 2 frontier wars, and there was something steady in her eyes that nothing seemed to shake. She was reading a report on a thin glass tablet and frowning a little. At the communications station sat Petty Officer Hannah Doyle. She was young, only 26, and her job was to listen. She listened to the long, empty channels of deep space all day, every day. Most of the time she heard nothing but static and the slow ping of distant beacons. Today, she heard something else. It started as a whisper inside the noise. A small shape that did not belong. Doyle leaned closer to her console and tilted her head. She tapped a few keys and tried to clean the sound. The whisper grew louder. It was a voice. A voice speaking in a strange, soft language she did not know. "Captain," she said quietly. "I have something." Carter set down his mug. "What kind of something?" "A distress call. Hidden under 3 different Elder Race codes. Old code layers. I think someone tried hard to keep it from being heard." That got the bridge's attention. Holt walked over and stood behind Doyle's chair. Together they listened as Doyle slowly peeled the codes back. The voice grew clearer with each pass. It was thin and frightened. And under the voice, very faint, were other sounds. Children crying. Something heavy falling. A long, dry boom in the distance. "It is Velinari," Holt said. The Velinari were a small, gentle people, known for soft music and beautiful gardens. Almost no one ever heard them shout. Hearing one beg was strange and wrong. Doyle ran the routing log. Her face went pale as the data scrolled up the screen. "Captain," she said, "this signal has been broadcasting for 19 days. Carter blinked once. "Say that again." 19 days, sir. And it has been received and confirmed by other ships. 7 Concordance vessels. 2 Sylphine cruisers. 1 Velinari transport." She swallowed. All of them logged the signal. All of them noted it was outside their mandate. And all of them kept going. For a long moment no one on the bridge spoke. The Concordance was the great council of older races that ran most of known space. They were old, polite, careful, and very proud of how civilized they were. They liked to remind humans, often and at length, that humans were young, loud, and reckless. They had rules for everything. One of those rules said you did not enter sovereign space without permission, even to help. Holt looked at Carter. Carter looked at the screen. The voice was still speaking. The children were still crying. None of it was loud. That was almost the worst part. It was 19 days of quiet pleading that no one had answered. "Where is the signal coming from?" Carter asked. Doyle brought up a star chart. A single small dot blinked on a green world. Senaru, 3. A Velinari research colony. Population roughly 10,000 civilians. No military presence. Distance. 41 hours at full burn. Holt did not wait to be asked. She already had her tablet open. "Sir," she said, "protocol is clear. We do not have authority to enter that system. If we go, we break the non-engagement accord. If we go and something is wrong there, we may also end up in a fight we cannot win. We are 1 frigate." "I know what we are," Carter said. "I am not telling you what to do. I am telling you what the book says. And what does Megan Holt say? He asked. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, very simply, there are children on that world, sir. Carter nodded slowly. He turned to look out the viewport. The dust of the hollow veil drifted past the glass like a slow gray river. Somewhere on the other side of it, a small world had been crying for 19 days, and nobody had come. He thought about the 7 Concordance ships that had passed by. He thought about the way the elder races spoke about humans at council meetings. He thought about his own daughter, who was 12 years old and lived on a colony world not very different from Senaro 3. He turned back to the bridge. Helm, he said, come about. Set course for Senaro 3, maximum burn. Engineering, prep the reactor for sustained push. Comms, do not answer any hails until we know what we are flying into. Sir, Holt said carefully, Command will hear about this. The Concordance will hear about this. There will be consequences. Carter looked at her. He did not smile, but something in his face softened a little. Then they will hear about it, Commander. Make the turn. The iron verdict came about slowly in the dust. Her engines flared from a dim glow to a hard, bright blue. The dust spun away from her in long curls. She faced the dark, and then she went into it, and the dust closed up behind her like a door. On the bridge, Chief Engineer Kyle Brennan's voice came over the intercom. He was a big, loud man with a thick beard and a habit of saying exactly what he thought. Captain, I am hearing we are about to do something stupid. You heard right, Chief, Carter said. Then I am about to make the reactor do something stupid too. Give me 10 minutes. You have 8. Understood, sir. I love this job. The intercom clicked off. In the lower decks, the Marines were already being woken up. Master Sergeant Owen Pike walked the corridors in his bare feet, knocking on doors and saying only 2 words at each one. Gear up. The Marines did not ask questions. They knew that look. They had seen it on him before. They got up and started checking their armor. Back on the bridge, Doyle was still listening to the signal. She had set it to play softly on her console so that the voice would not be alone anymore. The Velinari woman did not know anyone was coming. She was just speaking into the dark, again and again, the same words, the same plea. Holt stood beside Doyle and put a hand on the young woman's shoulder. She does not know yet, Holt said quietly. But she will. Outside, the iron verdict cut a thin blue trail through the gray dust of the hollow veil. Far behind her, on courses she could not see, the elder ships kept going about their own business. None of them looked back. The iron verdict went into the dark alone. For the moment, that was enough. 41 hours later, the iron verdict dropped out of fold space at the edge of the Senara system. The first thing the bridge crew saw was wrong. The orbital station above Senaro 3 was broken open like a cracked egg. Bits of metal and frozen air drifted around it in slow circles. The lights inside were dim and flickering. The station had been there for 60 years. Now it was a ruin. The second thing they saw was worse. 3 big black ships hung in orbit around the green planet below. They did not look like Velinari ships. They did not look like anything the Concordance flew. They were heavy and ugly, with long gun barrels pointed straight down at the surface. Captain Daniel Carter leaned forward in his chair. Identify those ships. Petty Officer Hannah Doyle worked her console for a few seconds. Her face went hard. Iron Dominion, sir. Raider-class destroyers. 3 of them. On the bridge, no one moved for a moment. Everyone knew about the Iron Dominion. They were a slave empire run by a warlord named Archon Kresh. They went from world to world, took what they wanted, killed who they wanted, and made slaves of the rest. The Concordance pretended they did not exist. The Concordance pretended a lot of things. Lieutenant Commander Megan Holt looked at the screen and her jaw tightened. They have been here for almost 3 weeks. They are not in a hurry. They are taking their time. Why? Doyle asked quietly. Holt answered without looking away from the screen. Because they think no one is coming. Carter touched the intercom. Chief, talk to me. Chief Engineer Kyle Brennan's voice came back fast. Reactor is hot, Captain. We can hit them, but if we go in straight they will see us a long way off, and 3 raiders against 1 frigate ends one way. What if we did not go in straight? There was a pause. Then Brennan said, Captain, are you about to ask me to do the thing I told you was a bad idea last year? I am. Good. I have been wanting to try it. Carter turned to the helm. Bring us in low under the gas giant. Use the magnetic field to hide our heat signature. We will come up behind them, close enough to spit on them. The helmsman, a young man named Eric Wallace, swallowed once. Sir, that field will play havoc with the reactor. The math says we have a 60% chance of a containment fault. Then it is a good thing we have Brennan, Carter said. Do it. The iron verdict slipped down toward the huge orange ball of the gas giant. Its bands of cloud were striped like a tiger's coat. The ship dove in close, almost skimming the upper atmosphere. The magnetic field of the giant whirled wrapped around the frigate like a thick blanket. Lights flickered. Alarms tried to sing. Down in engineering, Brennan moved around the reactor core like a man dancing with a tiger, talking to the machine in a low, steady voice that sounded almost kind. Easy now, he said. Easy, sweetheart. Hold together for me. Just a little more. The reactor held. The ship slid around the gas giant in a wide, silent arc. By the time the iron verdict came back up, she was right behind the 3 Dominion destroyers, and the Dominion ships were still staring down at the planet, still firing slow, lazy beams at towns and villages they had already half destroyed. Forward batteries, Carter said, target the lead ship's engine block. Fire on my mark. Tactical was Ensign Paula Bishop, a quiet woman with a steady hand. Locked, sir. Mark. The iron verdict opened up. Her forward gun slammed into the back of the lead destroyer at point-blank range. The Dominion ship had no time to react. Its engine block came apart in a bright, ugly flower of fire, and then the whole vessel split in half and drifted in 2 pieces. The other 2 destroyers began to turn. They were slow. Carter did not give them time. Helm, drive us right between them. Broadside on the way through. Aye, sir. The iron verdict shot forward like a knife between 2 great fish. Her side guns hammered to port and to starboard at once. Plasma bolts raked across the bellies of both destroyers. One lost its main reactor and began to drift, dark and silent. The other took heavy damage but stayed in the fight. It turned and started firing back. A heavy bolt hit the iron verdict near her engines. The whole ship shook hard. Lights went red. Down in engineering, Brennan was thrown into a wall and got back up with blood on his face, swearing at the reactor and patting it like a horse. Not today, sweetheart, he said. Not today. On the bridge, Holt called out damage reports. Carter listened with half an ear. He was watching the planet below. Even from orbit he could see the fires. Sergeant Pike, he said into the intercom. You ready? Down on the Marine deck, Master Sergeant Owen Pike was already in his drop armor. 40 Marines stood behind him in a long row, helmets on, weapons checked. The drop pods waited like rows of black coffins. Normally a drop took careful planning. They did not have time for that. They were going to drop unguided, straight down through atmosphere, and hope for the best. Ready, sir, Pike said. His voice was calm. Drop on my mark. Get to the central spire. Find survivors. Hold until we can pull you out. Understood. Mark. The drop pods fell from the iron verdict like dark seeds. They burned through atmosphere in long bright lines. Some of them got hit by ground fire on the way down. Most of them made it. Pike's pod hit the ground hard inside the ruins of what had once been a public square. He kicked the door open and was already firing before his boots touched the broken stone. For the next 43 hours, the Marines fought their way through the dying colony. Dominion troops outnumbered them more than 10 to 1. The Marines did not stop. They moved building to building, room to room, hallway to hallway. They were tired, hungry, bleeding, and they did not stop. In one of the deep farming bunkers under the city, a small group of Velinari hid in the dark. They were thin, gentle people with pale skin and long, delicate hands. They had been hiding for 19 days. They had heard the bombing above them and they had wept and waited and prayed to gods that did not seem to be listening. Among them was an ambassador named Lisseril Ventor. He was wrapped in a torn robe and held 2 small Velinari children close to his chest. He had been told all his life that humans were violent and crude. He had read papers about them. He had agreed with the papers. Now he watched through a slit in a blast door as a human marine, bleeding from his shoulder, his arm, and his leg, dragged two Velinari children out from under a fallen wall. The marine had one arm free. He used it to fire his rifle at the Dominion soldiers behind him. He used the other arm to carry the children to safety. He did not look like a savage. He looked like a tired father trying to get his kids to the car. Lisseril Ventor did not have words for what he was seeing. The papers he had read had not prepared him for it. Above the planet, the Iron Verdict took another hit and kept firing. The last Dominion destroyer finally broke apart in a slow bright bloom. Black smoke poured out of the Iron Verdict's flank, but she held station and lowered her shuttles toward the surface. On the bridge, Carter stood at the viewport and watched the small boats rise from the dying colony, one by one, carrying survivors up to his ship. He counted them. 6,011 Velinari were alive. 3,989 were not. The math was simple and terrible. He did not feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had arrived too late. He stood at the glass and watched the boats come, and he did not say anything for a long time. The Iron Verdict limped home slowly. Her hull was burned black in 3 places. One of her engines wheezed and coughed like an old man with a bad chest. Inside, every spare room had been turned into a place for the Velinari survivors. 6,000 frightened people slept on blankets in the cargo bays, ate ration bars in the mess hall, and held each other in the corridors when the lights went low for night cycle. Captain Daniel Carter walked through those corridors every day. He did not say much. He nodded at people. He helped carry water jugs. Once he sat for an hour on the floor of a cargo bay with a small Velinari child who could not stop crying, just sitting there, not trying to fix it, just being near. Ambassador Lisseril Ventor watched him do this. The ambassador was still recovering from his own wounds. His arm was wrapped in white medical gauze, and his eyes were dark with everything he had seen. He did not speak to Carter much. He did not know what to say. At last the Iron Verdict reached the Concordance capital, a great silver world called Atharine Prime. The capital had been built by the elder races over thousands of years. It had towers like long crystal fingers and gardens that floated in the air. It was very beautiful. It was very old. It was very proud. Carter expected a thank you. He did not get one. The moment his ship docked, Concordance security troops came aboard. They were polite. They were also armed. They placed Carter, Holt, Brennan, Pike, Doyle, and 6 other officers under arrest. The charges were read out in a calm, soft voice that made the words sound worse. Unauthorized military action. Violation of the non-engagement accord. Destruction of foreign vessels without sanction. Entry into sovereign space without permit. A long list, read out one charge at a time. Holt looked at the security officer reading the list. And the 6,000 civilians we saved, she asked. Is that on the list? The officer did not answer. He was just doing his job. The hearing was held in the Hall of Long Voices. It was a huge round chamber, with seats rising in tall rings around a small open floor. The walls were made of pale stone that glowed softly from within. The elder races liked their courtrooms to look holy. Today the room was packed. On the high seat sat Speaker Olin, the leader of the Concordance Council. He was a tall, thin being of the Korith race, with long silver fur and eyes the color of cold water. He was old. He was wise. He believed, deeply and truly, that he was a good person, and that goodness meant following the rules. Carter stood on the open floor in a plain gray uniform. Holt stood beside him. Behind them stood the rest of the crew. None of them spoke. They had been told not to. Speaker Olin read the charge sheet for 9 hours. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The hall was very quiet. When he was done, he made his speech. The humans, he said, acted from a kind impulse. We do not deny this. But kindness without wisdom is a weapon. The Iron Dominion has now been struck by a power that, by association, includes the Concordance. There will be reprisal. There may be war. Trillions of lives may now be at risk because one ship's captain decided his feelings mattered more than 2 centuries of careful peace. The humans have shown us what we feared. They are loud. They are violent. They cannot be trusted to follow the rules that keep us all alive. He paused. The hall was silent. It is the recommendation of this council, he said, that Captain Daniel Carter and his senior officers be stripped of rank, that the human colonies be placed under formal observation, and that the species of humanity be reviewed for membership status. Carter did not move. He had expected something like this. He stood with his hands behind his back and his eyes on the floor. Then a small voice spoke from the back of the hall. "May I be heard?" Everyone turned. A thin Velinari was walking slowly down the central aisle. His arm was still in a sling. His robe was clean but plain. He used a cane. He was Ambassador Lisseril Ventor, and his own government had ordered him to stay quiet. He had decided not to listen. Speaker Olin frowned. "Ambassador, you are not on the witness list." "I know," Ventor said. "I am putting myself on it." There was a long pause. Then the speaker nodded once. He could not refuse. The rules said any survivor of a recognized incident could speak. Ventor walked to the witness rail. He set down his cane. He looked around at the great hall, at the rows of council members in their fine robes, at the cameras that broadcast this hearing to 100 worlds. He did not look afraid. He looked tired. "I will be short," he said. "I have one story and one question." "For 19 days, he began, my home cried into the dark. We cried for help. My wife cried. My children cried. My neighbors cried. We sent the signal again and again. We were told, by the people who built our radios, that someone would come. We believed this." He paused. His voice did not shake. It was almost soft. 7 Concordance ships received our signal. I have the names. The Telenai. The Vorishkai. The Bright Sound. The Last Step. The Quiet Field. The Star Path. The Long Hand. 7 ships. Each one heard our voices. Each one looked at the rules. Each one decided we were not their problem. Each one kept going. The hall was very still. Somewhere, a council member coughed and then went silent. On the 20th day, Ventor said, a human frigate came. It was one ship. It was outgunned. It was alone. It did not check the rules. It came. 40 hours of hard burn. 3 enemy ships waiting. 40 human marines on the ground against many hundreds. I watched from a bunker. I saw a human soldier bleeding from 3 wounds. He was carrying 2 of our children out of a burning building. He was still firing his rifle with his other hand. He did not know I was watching. He was not doing it for show. He was doing it because he had been told there were children there, and he had decided that was enough. Ventor turned slowly and faced Speaker Olin. "Speaker," he said, "I have one question. Which of these is savagery? The 7 who heard and walked on? Or the one who came?" No one answered. Doyle, in the back row, quietly queued up the recording of the 7 ships logging the signal. Each captain's voice played in turn. Each one heard. Each one acknowledged. Each one moved on. The playback took 12 minutes. No one in the hall spoke for any of it. When it was done, an old Sylphine counselor stood up and walked out of the chamber. Another followed. Then a third. They did not speak. They just left. Speaker Olin sat very still on his high seat. His hands were folded. He did not look at Carter. He did not look at Ventor. He looked at something far away. At last he spoke, and his voice was much quieter than before. "The charges against Captain Carter and his crew are withdrawn. This hearing is closed." There was no applause. The hall began to empty in a kind of stunned silence. Carter walked out with his crew behind him. In the corridor, an old Sylphine woman stopped him. Her long pale hand touched his shoulder. "I am sorry," she said. Carter did not know what to do with that. He nodded once. He kept walking. The peace did not last long. 3 weeks after the hearing, Archon Kresh of the Iron Dominion sent his answer. It was not a small answer. It was not a careful answer. It came in the form of 240 warships, moving as one black fleet, headed straight for human space. Kresh was not the kind of warlord who let 3 of his destroyers be destroyed without making someone pay. He had decided to pay back the loss many times over. He wanted to burn humanity out of the galaxy like a man stamping on a small fire. He wanted other species to watch him do it, so that no one would ever again think it was safe to stand against him. News of the fleet reached Atherine Prime first. Speaker Olin called an emergency meeting of the Concordance Council. He looked older than he had at the hearing. The events of the past month had aged him in ways no clock could measure. He stood before the council and spoke plainly. "We have a choice," he said. "We can stand with the humans, who have done a brave and reckless thing. Or we can stay neutral, as our protocols demand, and let the Dominion crush them. I will not pretend the choice is easy. But it is a choice, and it must be made." The vote was held. The result was closer than anyone had expected. The council voted, by a narrow margin, to remain neutral. The protocols held. The humans would face the Dominion alone. But 3 elder races, when the vote came around to them, abstained in protest. They did not vote against neutrality. They simply refused to vote at all. It was a small thing. It would matter later. On Earth, the Human Defense Command did not waste time arguing. They began pulling every ship they had toward a single point, a narrow stretch of space called the Lyra Gate. It was the choke point Kresh's fleet would have to pass through to reach the colonies. The humans would meet him there. Captain Daniel Carter was given the iron verdict back, freshly patched and repainted, and told to take her to the line. He went without complaint. Holt, Brennan, Doyle, and Pike came with him. Their old crew came back from leave without being asked. None of them wanted to miss this. At Lyra Gate, the human fleet gathered. 81 ships in all. Frigates, destroyers, 2 old battleships, and a long line of converted freighters fitted with whatever guns the shipyards had been able to bolt on in a hurry. The Dominion fleet, when it arrived, would be roughly 3 times that number, and most of their ships would be heavier. Carter walked the bridge of the iron verdict and looked at the line on the tactical display. He did not say anything for a long time. Holt came to stand beside him. "They will come tomorrow," she said. "I know. We are going to lose a lot of people, sir." "I know that too." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am still glad we went." Carter looked at her. He smiled, just a little. "So am I." It was at this moment that the long-range sensors began to chirp. Doyle bent over her console. Her face changed slowly from worry to confusion to something that was almost wonder. "Captain," she said. "You should see this." On the display, a long line of new ships was coming into the system. They were not Dominion. They were not human. They were small, mostly. Some of them were beautiful in the way old things are beautiful. They were Velinari. Hundreds of them. They were not warships. The Velinari did not really have warships. They were hospital boats, school transports, food haulers, mining tugs. They had been painted with white crosses and red bands of medical marking. Their hulls were thin. They were not armored. They were full of volunteers. At the head of the long line came a single old transport. Its captain was Ambassador Lisseril Ventor. His voice came over the open channel. He sounded tired. He sounded calm. "Captain Carter," he said. "My government has not given permission for this. I am not asking for it. We are here. We brought medical supplies. We brought repair drones. We brought every fabricator we could find. We will not watch a second time." On the bridge of the iron verdict, Hannah Doyle was crying quietly at her station. She did not seem to know she was doing it. She just kept working. Carter pressed the calm ambassador, he said. "You are welcome here." Within 30 hours, more ships arrived. A Sylphine cruiser, crewed by sailors who had left their fleet without orders. 3 Korith trade vessels carrying food and water. A small ship from a quiet race called the Telesh, who almost never left their home system. Each ship came on its own. Each ship was crewed by people who had broken their own laws to be there. Their governments had said no. Their citizens had said yes. The line at Lyra Gate began to thicken. Then the Dominion came. They emerged from fold space in a long black wave, 240 strong. At their head flew the Black Sovereign, the flagship of Archon Kresh. It was a huge ship, twice the size of anything in the human line. Its hull was carved with the names of the worlds Kresh had taken. The list was long. Carter looked at the wave of black ships coming toward him and he keyed the open channel one last time. "All ships," he said. "This is Captain Carter, iron verdict. We hold the line. We do not break. If you have to fall back into the medical ships. They are behind us for a reason. Stay alive. Take care of each other. Good hunting." The battle began. It lasted 6 days. There is no clean way to tell 6 days of war. There were moments. There were too many of them. On the second day, Chief Engineer Kyle Brennan invented a way to redirect waste heat into a shaped pulse that fried the targeting systems of any Dominion ship that flew too close. He did not have time to explain how it worked. The other human engineers copied him by watching. By the third day, half the fleet was doing it. On the third day, Master Sergeant Owen Pike led a boarding action onto a crippled Dominion cruiser with 12 Marines. They came back with 7. They also came back with the cruiser's command codes, which Doyle used to trick 3 other Dominion ships into firing on each other. On the fourth day, the Velinari medical transports moved into the line to pull damaged human ships out for repair. They were too thin to take hits. They took hits anyway. 23 of them did not make it. Ambassador Ventor stayed at the front of the line the whole time. On the 5th day, Archon Kresh himself moved the Black Sovereign forward. He had grown angry. He had expected the humans to break by the 3rd day. He wanted to finish this himself. He came to the front, certain that his ship was too big and too strong for anything in the human line to harm. He was wrong. Every ship in the defense line, human and Velinari and Sylphine and Korith and Telish, every captain in every chair, turned their guns on the Black Sovereign at the same moment. They did not coordinate it. They just all knew. The order came on no channel. It came from somewhere deeper than that. The Black Sovereign was hit by more weapons at once than any ship in galactic history had ever taken. It came apart in a slow, terrible bloom of fire that lit the system for almost a full minute. On the 6th day, the Dominion fleet, leaderless and bleeding, broke off and ran. The defense line at Lyra Gate did not cheer. They were too tired. They drifted in their broken formation among their own dead, and for a long time the only sound on any open channel was a soft static, the noise of a galaxy quietly listening to what had just happened. The Iron Dominion did not fall in a day. After the Black Sovereign died and the Dominion fleet broke at Lyra Gate, the old empire of Archon Kresh began to come apart from the inside. Slave worlds rose up. Generals turned on each other. Smaller warlords tried to grab pieces of the old empire and were cut down by their own troops. The work of fully ending the Dominion would take 19 more years. There would be raids and ambushes and small ugly wars on a dozen forgotten worlds. There would be more dead before it was done. But the back of the thing was broken at Lyra Gate, and everyone in the galaxy knew it. On Atherine Prime, something else broke too. It was quieter. It was harder to point at. It was the long, polite story the elder races had told themselves for hundreds of years. The story that they were wise and humans were not. The story that careful was the same as good. The story that following the rules and being a good person were always the same thing. That story was dead. Everyone had watched it die. There was no putting it back together. Speaker Olin of the Concordance Council resigned the day the Dominion fleet broke. He did not give a long speech. He simply said, on a public channel, that he had been wrong about a great many things, and that better people than him should now make the decisions. He left the capital and went home to a small house on his own world. He spent the rest of his life growing a kind of pale fruit and writing letters of apology to families whose names had been read out at the hearing. He sent every letter by hand. He answered every reply. 7 Concordance ship captains were removed from their commands. Their names were the same 7 names that Ambassador Lisseril Ventor had spoken into the Silent Hall. None of them returned to service. Some of them tried to explain. Most of them did not. There were no words that fit. A new council was called. This time the seats were not just for the old elder races. Humans were given a chair. So were the Velinari. So were 3 formerly silent species who had sent ships to Lyra Gate without permission from their own governments. The Sylphine sailors who had broken quarantine to come fight were not punished. They were promoted. The old protocols had broken too badly to repair. So the council wrote a new charter. It was short. The elder races like long documents full of careful clauses. This one was not like that. It had been written in 3 weeks by a small committee that met in a borrowed conference room and drank too much coffee. It contained one clause that became famous all over the galaxy. The clause was attributed to Ambassador Ventor when it was first read in public, but he always said that was not quite right. The line, he insisted, had been suggested late one night by Lieutenant Commander Megan Holt, who had been sitting on the floor of the conference room with her boots off and her hair in her face, drinking bad coffee out of a paper cup. She had said it as if it were obvious. As if there were no other way to say it. The clause read, "A distress signal received is a distress signal answered. There are no exceptions of convenience." It was not a perfect rule. Like all rules, it would be tested. People would argue over what the word convenience meant. There would be hard cases. There would be cases where good people disagreed. The clause would be bent. It would be argued in courts. It would be carved on the walls of academies and printed on the inside covers of training manuals and quoted in 1,000 bad speeches by 1,000 bad politicians. But it held. Whenever the galaxy forgot it, someone would remember it. And the galaxy was a little kinder for it. As for the crew of the Iron Verdict, life went on, the way life does. Captain Daniel Carter was offered an admiralty. The new council wanted him to wear a long coat with gold on it and sit in a chair on Atherine Prime and look impressive at meetings. He declined. He said he was not good at meetings. He said the work still needed doing on the frontier, and he was the one who knew how. He took the Iron Verdict back out into the dark. He kept patrolling. He found 2 more distress calls in his last years of service. He answered both of them. He retired at 61. He went home to a small house and a grown daughter and a wife who had waited a long time for him. He spent his last years fishing badly in a small lake and being beaten at chess by his grandchildren. Lieutenant Commander Megan Holt took over the Iron Verdict when Carter retired. She was a good captain. She was a better one a year later. She served for 20 years. Her crew loved her. She did not understand why, which was one of the reasons they loved her. Chief Engineer Kyle Brennan wrote up his harmonic reactor work and submitted it to 3 engineering journals. All 3 rejected it. He submitted it again. They rejected it again. He kept submitting it. After Lyra Gate, all 3 journals quietly published it without ever explaining why they had refused. Brennan framed all 3 rejection letters and hung them on the wall of his office. He said they were the most valuable papers he owned. Petty Officer Hannah Doyle, the young woman who first heard the signal, went on to teach at a communications school. She taught one thing above all others. She taught her students to listen. Really listen. To trust the small whisper in the noise. She kept the original recording of the Senaru 3 distress call on her office wall, in a frame, with the date written below. Her students did not understand at first. By the end of her course, they did. Master Sergeant Owen Pike never spoke about Senaru 3 in public. He never wrote a book. He never gave interviews. He retired from the Marines and went to live quietly in a small town on a colony world. Once a year, on the anniversary of the rescue, he flew to the rebuilt Velinari colony at his own expense. Each year, he was met at the landing pad by Velinari who had learned his name. They never made a big show of it. They just walked with him through the rebuilt streets. They held his hand if he wanted. He almost always wanted. Ambassador Lisseril Ventor became, in time, the first non-human speaker of the new concordance. He served for many years. He was a good speaker. He was a careful one. He kept on the desk of his office a single piece of melted armor plating, scarred and twisted, that had been pulled from the wreck of the original Iron Verdict during her last refit. When visitors asked what it was, he would smile a little and say, "It is to remind me what an answered signal looks like." Most visitors did not understand. He did not try to explain. He let them think about it. Many years later, in a Concordance Academy on a quiet green world, a young Sylphine cadet sat in a history class. She was watching old recordings from the Battle of Lyra Gate, the kind cadets watch in every class about the war. She raised her hand. "Instructor," she said. "I have a question." The instructor was an old veteran with a tired face. He had been on one of those ships. He looked up. "Yes, cadet." In all of these recordings, she said, the human ships are taking heavy fire. Some of them are burning. Some of them are losing people. And yet, on every open channel I can find, the humans are smiling. They are joking. They are laughing. Why are they doing that? It does not make sense. Why would they smile when they are losing people? The instructor was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, gently, Cadet, humans are a strange species. They do many things we do not understand. But there is one thing about them I have learned. They smile hardest when they have decided they are not going to lose. The cadet frowned. She wrote it down. She did not understand it. She suspected, correctly, that one day she would. Outside the classroom, the galaxy went on, a little safer than it had been before, because once, a long time ago, one small ship had heard a cry and turned.